Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from yarkspirifantasyart.com. Today I'm going to be working on an angel illustration, and it's an inside shot, so I'm dealing with a lot of perspective, again in this case. Now, just so you guys know, by the time this video is loaded up, a second video around the same time as a special feature is actually hidden within one of my other videos as we speak. So this other video it's a lot shorter than my normal videos, but it also covers a completely different topic compared to the rest of my illustrations. It is related to the Cyber Night Drawing series, so it is going to be hidden within one of those. And when you're watching the videos, you want to look for the mineral.com logo on the side. It should be highlighted by a very light box color. When you see that, you can click on it and you'll be brought to a separate window for the special feature video. Don't worry, if you do actually want to watch the full video, you will be able to. It's just going to open it up in a separate window for you. And once it does so, you can save the link if you want to see it in the future. Okay, so back to this video here. This one, although the background is once again pretty simplified, there isn't too much detail overall. It did need to look slightly decayed, like not overly decayed, but just slightly decayed. And it also needed a very gritty look. This wasn't supposed to be a very pleasant place for this character to be in. He is chained up in this area, so I did want to have a very gloomy looking environment for him. Once again, you'll notice that I'm pretty much working pretty close to grayscale. I did add a texture as well, just so I could work with it. But most of the texture actually ends up getting covered because I normally paint over it. So there's very little of the texture actually visible later on. But the small amount that is there does help add to the overall detail, which is why I kept it in there. Now, once again, to force perspective, I've added just a couple of extra details to the walls and the floor so that it looks as if it's coming towards you. This helps force the perspective a little bit more and makes it a more appealing drawing as well. And now I'm adding in the cracks for the walls. Once again, because this is not supposed to be a pleasant area for this individual to be in, I did want to make it look slightly decayed at least. While I'm adding this detail, I'm also working on a separate layer for this so that I can switch it on and off and decide whether or not I want to keep any of the information I've just added. It also makes it easier for me to lighten up certain areas that I may have overly detailed. Because it is on a separate layer, this is very easy to do. Now this drawing was not too long. It was about a 3 or 4 hour drawing overall. So it was fairly short. It wasn't too bad. Once again, I didn't have too much detail to deal with when it came to the background, and because I didn't have too much detail to worry about, the drawing did go a lot faster as well. Now, because of the character's position, this was actually a very difficult drawing for me to pose out, because there's a lot of foreshortening, especially in the neck and head area, and because his upper torso is moved forward so much, his arms have to bend backwards in a certain manner. So you'll see later on in this video I'll be working on a head design, and I decide to redo it because it didn't fit structurally what a human body would be doing in a pose like that. So this was a very difficult pose for me to work on because of the type of perspective that was involved and the type of foreshortening that was involved in the neck and head areas specifically. I did use reference though for the head, even though I didn't end up using the head drawing that I already started off with. I did still use reference for it. In this case, I actually used, because it wasn't an anatomy study per se, I used a book called Facial Expressions by Mark Simon. And this is a really good book because what this author did is he took hundreds, if not thousands, of photos of different people's faces, doing different expressions and up and down views of those facial expressions and their faces in general. So for facial analysis purposes, or even just understanding how the face moves generally, it's a very essential guide for me because it goes through so much information. Now I am starting to add some of the details to his clothes. He doesn't have too much on, just because I do want to emphasize the fact that he's pretty much a prisoner. Well, he is a prisoner because he is chained up to the walls. I did have to do quite a bit of work on the lighting for this piece, because the lighting was very important for setting up the mood for this character and what he's feeling. So for this reason, I did spend quite a bit of time figuring out whether or not I liked the contrast levels on the character itself and see if it worked with the overall drawing. Now the wings were actually pretty easy to do. I did use a specialized brush which did make it a tiny bit easier, but generally speaking, you don't have to draw every feather out when you're drawing wings. You just have to hint at the details normally, and that's normally enough for it to read properly. So that's what I did in this case, is in most of the details that you see, I only hinted at the overall structure and detail that was in the wings itself. Now, because the wings are obviously behind him, because they're on his back, I did also have to make sure that the shadows that would have been cast were also casting onto his body. But at the same time, I needed to make sure that his body stood out from those shadows so that they didn't just meld in. Now, for the chains that you see me drawing in, I actually do have a special brush for that. It's one of the brushes that Darken uses, and it does make it a lot easier because once I set up the initial strokes for the chains, then I can just add the individual shading I have done it in the past from scratch, but it's just too time consuming. For something like this, it's definitely easier to use a pre-made brush and just modify certain areas as you need to. Now, because the chains were not the correct color and they weren't aligned correctly, and I knew I would have to change that after I drew it, I did have to do some modifications to the structure, and I also had to modify the contrast levels so that they properly matched the rest of the drawing as well. Now for the head design that you see me drawing here, this is the initial head that I started off with, and while it worked for the, like, structurally for head drawing, it didn't work for this pose, just because in order for the character's arms to be that far back and that far up, it does force the body significantly forward, and because of that I did have to change the head design to the point where you could only see his hair, because somebody would be so far forward that you wouldn't be able to see any of the facial features at that point because they were pushed over so much. So although I did like the face drawing that I did on this, it just wasn't correct, so I ended up redoing it, which is also why I left it until the end. Now I did try to make it work, but like I said, it just didn't fit structurally with the drawing, so because of that I did have to get rid of it. Now in this one you see that the head is a lot more forward. It's definitely conveying the fact that he's being forced forward because of his position. Now I did debate whether or not I was going to do a door in the background, but I decided against the door simply because I've seen it too many times, so I did want to do something a little bit different. So I decided to do, well, if I have an angel, then maybe it's hell itself that's holding him prisoner. So for that reason, I literally drew my interpretation of hell. And I did have to balance out, because of the harsh colors that were behind it, all those colors would filter onto the character and illuminate the character. So once I was done detailing the actual character, I had to make sure that those same colors read on top of the character, the angel character. So I just went in afterwards and just added the orange highlights that I needed to. So this is the finished piece. I hope you guys all like this drawing. This one's really a lot of fun to work on, and I hope you guys tune in next week. And don't forget, I did hide a video in the Cyber Knight series. It's one of those 4 videos that I posted, so look for the flashing mineral.com sign on the sides. Thank you and take care.